Massive thunder crash.
Well, it's out.
Too much passion to let it run out, I'm good.
Source.
I ain't moving. My shape is final, bitch. Hunters, it's your turn to talk about a DPS build. For today, we'll be sticking with All Reliable, but I wanted to mention that there will be a few other DPS builds down the line, such as Arc Hunter. I just need to wrap up some other things, like finishing the Solo Flawless guide for Hunters for Thunder Doctrine, and getting some red borders. Moving along, today's build will be featuring Prismatic Hunter, and utilizing the best heavy weapon currently in the game for both easy damage and easily accessible for basically the entire player base, that being Queensbreaker. Now for the build itself, let's cover what is different about Prismatic Hunter this episode from Episode Heresy. The big change is that we no longer have access to unlimited weaken and reloads through concussive reload and using a grenade launcher like Lost Signal. The good news is everything is replaceable, while things like energy GLs and heavies like Grand Overture and heavy GLs are falling out of favor. We're replacing them with Queenbreaker, which has its own built-in sustained auto reloads, as well as other newly updated weapons like Praetus Revenge, which we'll be using as a backup weapon in this build. Queenbreaker will be the main primary source of damage, while Praetus comes as a backup weapon for when your ammo is dry on your heavy, or a damage phase is simply just very long, such as the Corrupted Puppeteer. And the reason I'm mentioning Praetif is because its updated perk pool, which can now roll the combo of Rewind Rounds and Elemental Honing, is very good. Elemental Honing is a new damage perk that allows you to get up to 40% bonus damage with kinetic weapons, with the main condition being doing damage with other elements, in other words, Arc, Solar, Void, Strand, and Stasis. The good news about this is Prismatic Hunters can easily fulfill this condition. So here's what our Hunter kit is looking like. We have Golden Gun as our main super with Celestial Nighthawk, pretty standard there for massive damage. In our abilities, we have Marksman's Dodge, just to get a reload off if we need it. However, if you will not be reloading, like you're using Rewind Rounds to get your ammo back instead, you can opt to go into Acrobat's Dodge. This can be used to give yourself Radiant in the event that a Well of Radiance is not present, or maybe the Well of Radiance has just simply run out and you need to reapply Radiant. This can give you and your teammates Radiant to get that bonus damage back to 20% instead of just a flat 0. For your other two abilities, this is where it gets interesting. So, my base loadout for this is always Snare Bomb and Dust Field. Snare Bomb is there for Void, and also, main importantly, Weaken. In the event that I am by myself, I can weaken whatever I want, and in Prismatic, I can just spam this to keep weakening a boss. Dust Field is there to get my Darkness meter up, as well as Freeze an Enemy, which is a Darkness debuff, which contributes to one of the fragments that I have down below. One more thing about the abilities, you could switch these up as well, depending on how you want to utilize your build. If you want to build into Elemental Honing, for example, you could put Magnetic Grenade on, and then put on Threaded Spike. That way, you have Void and Strand in these two abilities ready to go, and then that's how you get those elements towards Elemental Honing. In our aspects, Stylish and Winter Shroud is pretty standard. These aren't set in stone, but these are what my base ones are. You can switch these up to something else with like Ascension or GPG if you'd like, but that's what I have on. For the fragments, let's start with the big one. The first is Facet of Courage, the staple for any DPS build with Nighthawk. So Facet of Courage lets you pump your ability damage, Arc, Solar, or Void, when you target a boss or an enemy with a Darkness debuff, that being Strand or Stasis. Essentially, any Darkness debuff would then pump the damage of your Celestial Nighthawk Golden Gun very easily. So there's a couple different ways you can do this. First is just straight up your abilities. For example, Dust Field Grenade, or maybe a Stasis Shuriken, or a Strand Threaded Spike. Any of these would apply a Darkness debuff onto the enemy, and then you can use your Golden Gun. Another method is using a Strand or Stasis weapon that will apply a debuff. The most common example for this is going to be any weapon with Chill Clip. For example, Riptide or Tenacious Mastery from Iron Banner. You shoot the enemy once, bang, they have a slow applied to them. Now you can shoot Golden Gun and get the extra damage. There is one more method. We'll get to that at the end of the fragments, but the second one is Facet of Protection, the staple. When you're surrounded by commands, you are more resistant to incoming damage. The third is Facet of Command. So anytime you freeze or suppress an enemy, it'll automatically reload your equipped weapons. This is really helpful for most weapons in the game where you would throw either your Dust Field or your Prismatic Grenade, and you would then get a instant reload on that weapon, even though you could be shooting it at the boss at that point. So let's say you're firing a random linear that doesn't have rewind rounds. So you're shooting your linear, you're down to your last bullet, but then Facet of Command applies, and you suddenly have your 6 shots back without having to actually manually reload or dodge. Number 4 is Facet of Dawn. Power melee hits against targets make you radiant. So this is helpful for 2 different situations. Number 1, you're playing solo. You can throw your smoke, make it a weaken effect on that enemy, and also give yourself radiant, which is a 20% empowering buff. So you get a boost in 2 different ways that way. And the other reason is if you're playing with a fire team, and again, you're a well-arranged player, either their wall got destroyed or it ran out, or maybe they're just not on well at all, well, this helps you get an empowering buff on the board if you need it. Although, it doesn't help your teammates unless you kill the target with that melee. Lastly, we have Facet of Solitude. This is what I was alluding to earlier with another way to get a Darkness debuff onto an enemy. This provides you a Severing Blast onto the target with rapid precision hits. Now, given that we're using 2 precision weapons in this build, Queenbreaker and Praetorius, this is easy to proc, and it's easier to get a Darkness debuff off onto an enemy, because that would help you with both Courage and in situations where you're with a fire team and a well player pops down while radiant, which then would proc your Courage because all of your weapons become ability damage. So Severing with Solitude helps you proc that, and also helps you with the Celestial Nighthawk Golden Gun situation too. Solitude also helps with eliminating needing a weapon to provide the Darkness debuff for you, so you don't need a Chocolate weapon, you could just use this instead. With that said, let's talk about a rotation for a boss damage phase with this kit. So typically, the first thing I like to do when I start out is, as the boss phase is starting, I throw a smoke onto that boss, making sure that they are immediately weakened when the boss damage phase starts, so you don't have to wait for your divinity or somebody being a designated tractor, tether, etc. You can just go outright. So the smoke is applied. As soon as I throw my smoke, I instantly pop Prismatic. When I pop Prismatic and go into Transcendence, all my weapons do 5% more damage, just because of being in Prismatic. As you do activate Transcendence, you can also activate your Golden Gun immediately on top of that to do a small animation cancel and save you a couple of seconds in the damage phase. Otherwise, you're stuck in the Prismatic animation for a second or two, and that just eats away at your DPS time. So after that, you can go ahead and throw another smoke if you like, or just your grenade. The grenade will then apply the stasis debuff, as well as giving you an ignition periodically for more damage. That way, as I'm finishing off my shots from my current Queenbreaker mag, the command fragment kicks in and gives me a full 6 shots back, making it so that I don't have to manually reload or use up my dodge. Then I keep shooting my Queenbreaker, and then if I get low once again, I already have the utility of my dodge there active to use that and have my 6 shots back immediately. Aside from that, it's just aiming your Queenbreaker and getting your crits as much as you can. Speaking of which, you may have noticed that most, if not all, of this video involves me not using Divinity on bosses while using Queenbreaker, and that seems weird, right? You would think, oh yeah, you would use Divinity, get easy crits. Well, you see, Bungie, once again, tried to fix particle reconstruction, and in part, kind of did, where you can now use Tether and Tractor with particle, and nothing will interfere with each other, but they also broke it because if you use Divinity with Particle, Divinity just overrides everything, and you get the 15% from Divinity, and then Particle just doesn't work. So, you're better off just not using Divinity, and then using Particle, and then combining with, like, Tether Tractor for normal damage numbers. Now, where does Praetorius come into play here? So, you can use it as either just as an emergency backup weapon when your Queenbreaker ammo runs dry, or you can try to utilize it to its best damage potential via Elemental Honing, the Vogue Origin trait on the weapons now, and the Artifact mod, which boosts weapon damage for Vogue weapons because of that Origin trait. So, what you would do then is you would hold off on your Golden Gun to start a damage phase, and initially just use Queenbreaker for your main source of damage until you run out of ammo. Then, you go and pop your Golden Gun, shoot the boss with your super, which then activates the Origin trait for Praetorius, and also does solar damage towards Elemental Honing. You would then throw your Dust Field, throw your Smoke, or maybe your Threaded Spike, depending on what elements you need. You would shoot your Energy Weapon for a 4th element, and then Queenbreaker obviously counted as the 5th element as Arc. Then, you would switch to your Praetorius weapon, and then you would have 14 shots thanks to the Origin trait, because it doubles the mag size. Praetorius normally can get 7. So 14 shots there, plus you have rewind rounds, plus you're doing bonus damage thanks to the Artifact perk, and you can shoot off like 40 shots consecutively. And honestly, 40 shots is probably lowballing it. Lastly, let's wrap it up with the mods. There's nothing extraordinary here, so we're going to quickly go through this. I kept you guys here long enough. So, for artifact mods, I mentioned Legend Incarnate. That's the perk that would pump Praetorius Revenge for the damage. And then, obviously, we also want to have Particle Reconstruction in to pump the damage of Queenbreaker. For the armor mods, it's very simple. Heavy Ammo Finder, Void Siphon. I'm rocking a Void energy slot weapon for this, by the way. Radiant Light to give your teammates armor charges when you're popping your Goldie. In gloves, Arc Dexterity, Arc Loader, and then Bolstering Detonation, nothing crazy. For the chest, Solar Resist, Arc Resist, and 1 Arc Reserves, just to get a little extra ammo for Queenbreaker. Boots, we have 3 Arc Weapon Surge for Queenbreaker. And then lastly, Special Affinity, Powerful Attraction, and Time Dilation in the class item. Again, very basic. And that'll do it for this build. Stay tuned for Arc Hunter and the Soul of Flawless for Sundered Doctrine. In the meantime, if you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing today. It does help the channel grow, and is much appreciated. If you want to go the extra mile, you can leave a like and or comment below as well. If you don't know what to leave as a comment, you can leave Queenbreaker as the comment. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.